No. 1, 2, okay. Right. Question, do we start at sharp or 15 past? Is it 4 o'clock when it says 4 o'clock, or? I have to explain this silly question. Because in Germany, since professors have to walk from their office to the lecture theater, when they say 4, it means 4:15. We're probably the only country in the world having this distortion, but there's always confusion about that. So here, when you say 4, you mean 4. Is that correct? Or you mean something? Okay. So maybe we give a few people the chance to come, but 4 o'clock is 4:15, but then it is 4:15 sharp. And we sometimes add the old Latin stuff, CT or ST, with time, cum tempore or sine. So 4 ST is 4:00, whereas 4 CT means 4:15, which is a typical culture shock. Oh, I forgot to mention that yesterday about studying in Germany. When you sort of arrive in lecture theater, nobody's there. They always wait. Or you come late because you finally have realized that trick with being 15 minutes late, but you overlook the ST for some other reason. And therefore you arrive 15 minutes late, everyone else is there. Okay, you experience that twice and that's done. Okay, so we still add a few minutes for the faithful ones to arrive, since we are on the finishing line and we end up with some formal stuff later on. So the good news is, since we have some formal stuff, it won't drag on till 7:30. Right, so maybe it's a good compromise if we start now. Won't take too long then. We're still up for a few topics. You heard a lot about research data management. Yesterday you heard even more about planning, not only data, but processes. How do we process our data? Because the whole process, the computer programs, the operating system, the machinery, essentially needs to be archived to be able to retrieve data. If you do your planning well, you may be able to avoid many of these challenges. And as I keep saying, my favorite stuff being plain ASCII. If you manage to store your data in plain ASCII, then your planning procedures are much simpler than if you use proprietary hardware, proprietary software. But on the other hand, since proprietary hardware isn't for research, you may not be able to avoid all the pitfalls. Now today we're going to talk a little bit on international perspectives and initiatives, just to give you an idea where, to our knowledge, the state of the affair is. And this is probably combined with the good news that not too much has happened so far. So one has a fair chance to jump in or maybe even get part of certain initiatives. We preached, and this is sort of half joking, but we told you that research data management is a further thing in the institutional research network. You have to support the infrastructure frameworks. We have libraries, we have collections of rare species, we have collections of minerals, we have university archives, and we do need university collections of data. The question is, what do we want to keep? How expensive is it? There's all this coming back, always the same issues. If you keep something, there are incurring costs involved. If you accept data, you accept the burden of paying for keeping that data without knowing who is going to give you the money in 15 years. Throwing away is bad for the reputation. So better be careful before you accept data. Check what is the format, what is the connectivity. Research data management will be important because data is one of the assets of the future. You know, the fourth paradigm. The oil of the 21st century is data. Yes, okay, we learned that we burn oil, stupid idea. We shouldn't burn data. Shouldn't lose it if it's really the asset of the 21st century. The institutional efforts required, we talked about that, and they will lead to organizational settings and to technical infrastructures. Now this makes the computer center people happy. Someone has to run the technology. On the other hand, there's not a blueprint for eternal funding. We see digital tools and digitized scientific workflows, and they have rising significance. In natural sciences, work on paper is almost out. It gives us new possibilities. The easiest being Google search your data. Well, maybe Google should know about it, so at least need some search procedures. Fast searches. We heard a brilliant talk last year in Germany from the humanities where they do research on how certain words are used by a poet. That you can derive the psychological state of this poet over time just by checking which words are used, how often and when. And you can match that with other reports on insanity of that poet. Say, okay, I'm using a rough word just to keep you fascinated. But using big data research, even in poetry, gives insight into the psychological feeling of a poet. Because you can do fast searching, fast counting. Automated digital scientific workflows, get the data in, annotate it, store it somewhere, make it retrievable. This is what we have been talking about. The new forms of science emerging called big data. And I think We're puzzled by this name of big data. What is big data? Well, big data is everything that's too big to handle, which means 30 years ago, big data was a gigabyte. Nowadays, it's something which is hard to handle because you have the input-output bottlenecks. The typical thing, they're faster, but it's this continuous race. You have faster interfaces, have more data, and it will clobber up the faster interfaces. And if you have enough data to clobber up your existing machinery, then we talk about data. What is big today may be small tomorrow. Long-term access is an ongoing challenge because when we store data, people may want to retrieve it for the next 15, 20 years. The distribution of data, also a challenge. Who stores what, how long, how error-prone is it? To technical failures, to political failures. And we get some good scientific practice, which we need as to be established in the digital domain. The good scientific practice, you know, thou shalt not copy, or at least tell that you copied, but never claim somebody else's work your own. This is a scientific standard which evolved over the centuries, and science worldwide believes in this standard, because otherwise your PhD isn't worth anything. You don't get it just for copying. And good scientific practice describes how we behave in science. There is no law, and science is cruel if you misbehave according to this guide of conduct, and we have to add that in the digital domain. The answer is called open scientific inquiry, open data, open source, and so on, so that we can really check what is going on. Openness, if the data is there and it's not sealed, encourages the diversity of analysis and opinion. And you know, the discussion on climate change, believe it or not, but at least if the data is open, you can have a look and make up your mind yourself. If it's closed knowledge, you have to believe what others are saying. And they may be influenced one way or the other. It's openness, always the answer in science over the last 300 years. Whenever you discover, you have to publish, and therefore we want open data, which is equivalent to that publishing procedure. Tell people what you did and how you derived your experiments. Having the data promotes new research, because once the data is there, somebody else might have a different idea to look at it and get some different information, better, new, or completely new. And once you have all this data, suddenly it triggers internal research as well. Handling big data, handling vast amounts of data requires new information, new thoughts in computer science. So the mere effect of sitting on 15 petabytes means you have to start thinking again, because 15 petabytes behave differently than 2 or 5 megabytes. In some sense, you might say that the system triggers itself. Since we keep the data, we have new research issues everywhere, including computer science on how to handle it. The impact is visible. We have to educate researchers. And the fact that you're here is very good, because it tells us people are interested. We have to learn worldwide, not just here, but it's a worldwide thing, how to do this data sharing, because we get this exploration of topic for free. You save expensive experiments if you have good quality data lying around. Maybe the creation of new data sets with different data from different sources, it will give insight. And I mentioned that, I think it was on Monday in history. You correlate climate data with migration, with other things, and suddenly you understand the reasons behind. Whereas just the successful battles of Napoleon, well, you learn about history and glory, but there's more behind. And the total setup requires different sets of data which have to be combined. And then you realize it's probably not about glory at all. There's some basic things like hunger on the other side, pushing people. We talk about data repositories, and of course we wonder about international data repositories. Coming up, misprint, with a procedure. It's all theory, and you sit back there, how is it going to work? Well, either you have a driving force. Driving force is one professor, Nobel laureate, say, who is leading science, says, okay, we need this. And then everyone else says, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, we'll do it. Or you have this small pressure group of people who have understood that we have to do something. They form a consortium, they apply for money, and they get something going. Or in case of Europe, you need someone who pushes a politician, and the politician believes that it's good for his or her career if she or he addresses the issue, and then you have a European Commission work on certain topics. And they're currently pushing open data in terms of writing, but not in terms of too much money. But at least the message of open data has arrived right at the top of the European Commission. Or you create a council. Again, that requires someone in politics. We have this Council on Information Infrastructures in Germany, and they wrote a white paper on how information infrastructures should be built. And the smart thing was, they didn't say we need one central institution in Berlin, but they came up with this wonderful and smart idea. We need many such centers because the needs of the different branches of science are so different. Let many blossoms bloom, was their message. And this triggered political activities like, we need money, but we won't sponsor one. It's open for competition. Please present us your ideas. The Research Data Alliance is another, grassroots, top-down, bottom-up activity of people who said, yes, we will take care of that. And after a couple of years, 10 years or so, somebody stumbles over the same problem, Googles and finds out, oh, someone has published a paper on that. And that's when suddenly such an alliance becomes viable. There's nothing you can really plan. I can't give you this sort of recipe book, how to start research data management in Curitiba. You have to look, what are the different methods that might work, and you try one and you probably will fail. Try another one, try a third one, and you realize somebody else who didn't spend that much time, but by accident tried method number 4 was successful. But at least it's about pushing and trying to get this message into the public. A few international activities. Oh, yes. Do we have the magic number for today? Okay, we have it. You'll get it. When data sharing becomes popular, the discipline-specific repositories pop up. Someone has to do it, and the high-energy physics is a wonderful example. They need the data arriving from Geneva. Either you have the data or you don't have the data. Doing computation only works if you have the data. And so the classical thing, do we really need, was not an issue. We need data. Therefore, we need storage. And they have set up this repository where the data from Geneva is copied to various sites in the world and copied from these sites to other sites, and finally copied to the institution which does research on certain topics. So they have a working model of a data repository, although it's not the working model you would think as a librarian. Eternal availability. What they are worried about is have the data, don't lose the data until it is processed, until the black hole has been discovered. And once the black hole has been discovered, All you need is the small data set that leads you to the black hole. And the rest is useless, throw it away. Or keep it to save the experiment. And you see, it's the same argument all over and over again. Keep it or lose it. If it's too expensive to keep, maybe throw it away. A very nice one is Pangaea. You know, the original continent, Gondwana, Pangaea, that's where the name comes from. I know that people in Bremen are involved in that as well. Oceanic data. They send up this ship into the Arctic. And of course, that's an expensive experiment. And the ship is away for 6 to 8 months. Better keep the data and correlate it with climate change and other data. So when you go for Pangaea, you see a working example of an international repository on specific fields. And they have staff up in Bremen and other places really worrying and taking care of the data. And they asked the National Science Foundation for money to actually program that data publisher, data explorer, so they have all the front-end technology for their data sets. The good news is it's not that we are preaching theory here. There are solutions in the world which seem to be working, at least for the moment. But when you talk to them, from our group, these questions about process management, they're not built in. So they learn as well. Exchange of ideas, you have the UK archive. Curation, acquisition, curation, and access for social and economic data. Now this is an active link, that's why it's not a misprint, it's a working link. I could click it, and I believe you will get the slides, and you can click on the slides to see what's actually going on. It's social and economic data they're collecting, and this is important because social data, maybe you want about migration, about other things, and we don't know what this data will tell us in addition to that what we already know. It's a good idea to keep a central site for social data. Or peptides. It explains itself. Mass spectrometry, proteomics, it's all there, collected. The experiments, you search, do you want to do this? What are the basics to generate the raw material? What's the outcome? And if somebody already did it, well, why would you run the experiment yourself? You just check if the peptide is in the atlas, and they have all of this combination of substances. You have all the properties. You can just look it up, saving probably 2 or 3 weeks of boiling in the chemistry lab. And this is a time saver. It's not complete, but when you have a new one, you may add it. And so this atlas is getting bigger and bigger, and apparently the community needs it, because otherwise the community wouldn't find the funds to operate that on a permanent basis. But sharing of data, you know, we are living in science, we don't care about national borders. But lawyers care about national borders. And therefore one sometimes has to be aware of what one publishes and how far one publishes. I remember that I think after the first Iraq war, the American scientific institutions banned all Iraqis from doing research in their databases, talking about political implications. And with Donald Trump, you wonder who is next on the list. The Cambridge Structural Database, it's a world repository for small molecules, organic and metal organic crystal structures. They could be useful in production of whatever. And if you tell the wrong people how to produce poison, you suddenly think, maybe we shouldn't have published that. On the other hand, science only lives from publishing. How do we put an embargo on that, saying we know, but we won't tell you, please register, and maybe then you get the information after clearance from Donald Trump himself, maybe. Open Context, which is an open access resource for field research from archaeology. And you may think archaeology is a safe thing. But suddenly you realize that this wonderful skull or whatever was stolen by your state 150 years ago. And suddenly, because the information is freely available, you're having a political issue. They want the skull back. Makes sense. This is not an argument against open data. This is just telling you that open data might lead to certain implications you hadn't thought of. So don't be surprised. Knowledge is good, but others may use the knowledge as well and may be upset. Let's have a look at the challenge of creating a larger infrastructure. If we believe what we've been talking about the past 3 months, then we can say that it will be strategic for a country and for a modern economy, knowing what is there. Another example, one of the first companies to realize the importance of research data management was the oil industry. Well, where do you find oil? And how do you find it? I'm not a specialist, but what I've learned is you plant explosions and you do seismic measurements. Correct measurement. You may derive some cavities down there. But then the computation facilities grew. So by checking the old data sets again, you can just use a computer to see whether there's another cavity down there. And you don't have to drill a hole because drilling is expensive. So they were the first to, or one of the first to realize, keep all the information you ever generated. It might be of enormous economic value. It saves you billions if you know drilling is of no point. There's nothing down there. And they had, at a very early stage, this challenge of keeping data, moving it from tape to tape and ongoing, because they understood it's vital for whatever, Petrobras or Shell, or to find new structures down there. Keeping it is expensive, and that's why we had this lecture on costs and financing. Getting the money is expensive. Be aware of what you store and make sure you have sustainable infrastructures, just as we have libraries. The options are partly obvious. Strengthen existing frameworks. Okay, yes, no trick behind that. High energy physics, earth sciences, they do that, and you don't have to preach to them. They also had an answer to this question on how to get the funds. When you apply for this huge accelerator, well, getting the extra billion for storage was relatively cheap. When you go for 15 billion, 300 million isn't much. When you go for 300 million on yourself, you realize that's a lot of money. Well, it's the same amount of money, but it turns out that if it's part of an even bigger project, then it's easy. If it's a project of its own, it's difficult. Humans are like that. Approaches, again, could be based on a discipline, service-specific, or even general purpose. Creating them might be a grassroots activity. And probably one of the most successful grassroots activities is take a PC, put in some disks, and say, I'll store it. We saw that when the web was born 20 years ago. Some people said, okay, I'll do it. Using some faculty funds, I just do it, invest my time. And after a while, they became quite significant because that was the source of information. And closing down the source, even if it was just a PC, because lack of faculty funds, called a worldwide uproar. in the community, and suddenly the faculty realized maybe we shouldn't do it. That's the grassroots approach. And that works quite well within a discipline. It doesn't work quite as well in a general purpose approach. The international setting is significant increase to be seen with specialized research institutes. Those who are specialized, like Geneva, suddenly realize data is part of our business, we have to do something. And we have the universities and the federal funded research institutions, they all have data, and it's easier to convince within a system. And if you convince the boss of, say, a Max Planck Institute, that the institute can become the world focus for that type of data, then maybe they get some of their standard funds. We have such a research institute for bird watching. And by accident, they have this huge collection of migration paths of birds, how they travel. I don't know whether this is often the case in America, but we have birds traveling from Europe to Africa and return within a year. So they travel to Africa when we have winter. In Europe, they come back in summer when there's enough food around, because all the nasty animals in Africa are not living in Europe, so they're somewhat safer. So breeding is easier. And when the little ones can fly, they sort of travel back. And they have this huge collection of bird paths, how they travel and how long it takes them. It takes only a few weeks to fly as a bird from Northern Europe to Southern Africa. And they do that several times in their life. And this collection of migration of birds was started grassroots in that institute, and now they have the most complete collection. So we have some research data management initiatives. We have in Germany GESIS, which is on social sciences and economics. We have the, as I mentioned, archaeological sciences. You see this grassroots activities, they're starting. Funding is based on sheer political interest or trends or powerful people. In Germany, at least the initial research funding is done by the Science Foundation. The disadvantage is it's short term. You have a project, runs for 2, 3, 4 years, and within that project you also get money for data storage. But what happens then? After the 4 years, the funds dry out and you sit on the data and you throw it away. And the National Science Foundation realized that this is indeed a waste of money. There is forthcoming initiatives to develop services like repositories, but still whether there is enough money to keep them alive, that's a question we will answer in the next decade or so. And you have these classical cycles of projects, abandon old projects when the funds dry out, start new ones, and with a new project find some funds to support the old structures. This is not sustainable. And therefore, no surprise, we don't get big national sites. The open questions, and we see the year 2019 in Germany, and probably the same is here, that the discussion starts on how to overcome that. Whether it's discipline-wise, whether it's national, whether it's international, disciplines international, it's open to the fields, and you have many voices, which may be confusing for you if you want to learn about that. And that's why I try to explain that. There is pure chaos out there, which is typical for a situation which is not yet well understood. So if you're confused, what should I do? And after 3 or 4 Google hits, you still haven't found the answer. You know you're just addressing a red-hot topic which is under development. It's evolving, and the outcome is completely unclear. all that we see is that the jobs of data scientists will be needed. So knowing how to store data, where to put data, what to do with it is good for your career. I can't tell you where your career will lead you to. Whether you have to move to, I don't know, the US or to Europe or to Australia, so it depends on your field. But data scientists, it's not yet so that you can study. There's no master course on how to become a data scientist, because the whole situation is still chaotic. It's like the birth of a new star. I mean, it's wobbling. There are no fixed continents so far. From the German point of view, I would say, except for a few small corners, there is no single strong player. Not our states, we have 16, not the federal government, nor the funding agencies or some consortia. No, there's no big player telling what to do. They're all struggling and wondering how they could address their needs. And therefore the good news is, if you want to hop on the bandwagon, it's a good time, because all the other competitors don't know more than you do. You probably, after these 3 weeks, I hope, know a bit more than the rest, because at least you know about the questions and the potential answers. We believe, this is our Freiburg view, that in many cases cooperation is the key. One reason is it's too expensive to replicate special services. Humans are expensive. And therefore, if you want to redevelop something, well, you're wasting the money twice. If you can team up with a partner, maybe cooperation helps. We've seen that in a different field, and that's why it's a bit off topic, but I'll tell it anyway. In supercomputing in our state in southern Germany, in the old days, each university had a supercomputer of its own. And therefore, the computing staff was sort of busy working with the machine, trying to find out how to get which compiler for which field and so on. We've changed that model by specializing, cooperating, like saying, for chemistry and related subjects, that's one university. For neurosciences and high energy physics, that's Freiburg. For data life science, we distribute that, which means we don't have more staff, but the existing staff has more time to concentrate on the focus problems and doesn't have to worry about everything. So we concentrate on how to do neuroscience. What compilers do you need, what software packages and so on. And the people in the other cities don't have to worry about that. That tells you that with existing infrastructure, with existing personnel, you can go farther, much further than with the old model. And that same applies for storage. You don't have to worry about having 2 storage sites. If you have an agreement of cooperation with another university, which is 150 kilometers away, say, okay, you mirror my data, I mirror yours. Saves you the job of having a second infrastructure. So cooperation is definitely the key. Again, challenges of cooperations is bottom up or top down. You find top down, the rectors meet and say, we'll do. When you find bottom up, frustrated administrator, overworked, calls his or her friend at the other place saying, look, can we team up? And the bosses will find out 5 years later. Typically, when the bosses are praised for this wonderful cooperation, you ask, what? Which cooperation? And then find out, oh, my staff worked on its own, coming up with this beautiful solution. So we have grassroots and we have top. Steering that is interesting. Who are the stakeholders and who should play and encourage something? Again, no answer, just telling you the world is full of challenges. Cooperation in Germany will lead from science data centers, SDCs, to a national infrastructure. The F is German for research. So national, in English would be NRDI, National Research Data Infrastructures, but okay, this is our abbreviation for that. Not just having a computer center, but having organized structures. And what you will have understood by now, in order to get this chaotic group of people and interest, what do you need to get them in row? You have this project money. If you behave well, you get some money for the next couple of years. Suddenly, they start to organize themselves, just to make sure that they get close to the honeypots. Cooperation with other institutions is, in our view, the only answer to this big challenge of research data management, because services are simply expensive. Sharing of expertise is good, and I think I can talk for my staff as well. Sharing the expertise with the local system administrators was helpful to both sides. Computers are an international challenge. They never run the way they should. And experiences on one side of the Atlantic or the other side, it helps both sides. So sharing experience is always good in science. To come to an end, since we shouldn't talk too long, to another lecture coming up, but to come to an end, an insight of what's going on in Germany this year. Just to give you an idea, that this chaotic structure might lead to something. And maybe if you see similar chaotic things coming up in Brazil, you know, okay, we know how to play the game. The universities are state financed and steered by the state, not by the federal government, not at all. So we have 16 strategies. The DFG does this indirect, but no political interference funding. And we have activities like the Excellence Initiative, where suddenly examiners from other countries examine German universities and ask questions of, do you have a research data management policy? And when you look behind, they just passed one at their institution, which is probably 4 weeks old. They come along and say, look, we have one. Do you have one? It's not that they have it for years, but do you have it for 4 weeks? And then you can answer, yes, we have one. We passed it yesterday, on equal terms. But that's how suddenly things start to move, because international review boards come along and ask questions from their home background. To sum up, I would say research data management is increasingly relevant. Pre-existing solutions should be used and handled, and international cooperation is probably the only sensible answer to really help everyone. And again, I would say this was not too concrete. I couldn't give you working examples like in 1960, they started with this and this and this, and therefore we have that and that and that. No, this is evolving. It's like a volcano bubbling, and you don't know about the future shape, which is good for young people because you know that this train will run for quite a while. Unless they realize research data is stupid, we throw it away. But after all that, what we taught you, I think this is very unlikely, because people start to understand that data is valuable. And therefore, jumping on the bandwagon of data management could be perhaps not a bad idea. So with these requirements, we are through. Yes, and it's time for a break before we go for the last topic, which will take us, I think, until 6, until the final official event. Well, I'm told that the Vice Rector of this university will come, and we'll have the official thank you and closing down ceremony. Ich habe nichts in nichts. Nein. So I think most people are back. Make a bit noise so that those still outside come in. And we are up for the last lecture of the whole setting. And I think I'm sort of expected. We're talking about sensitive data. When we have something set up, a repository, astronomy data is fine, no problem. But what with personal records, health records in repositories? You need big repositories to do research to find out the correlation between eating beef and certain types of cancer, or smoking and so you need to collect all this data, medical data, and try to get some statistical evidence. But on the other hand, it's a bad idea to have all these personal data. Medical data is a personal data, to have that open to the public. So what are the strategies to keep the information without linking it to the person? And this is something we have to consider when we talk about repositories. As I said, astronomy is probably safe. Chemical databases are probably safe. Chemistry works everywhere in the world, and it's not intimately related to people. Mathematics is safe. If you understand it, it's fine. But we have other fields of research that really do have sensitive data. Clinical trials, surveys, social interviews, video surveillance. Who was there yesterday? Maybe you want to delete it, but on the other hand, it's nice to see, to get some behavioral insight. And my favorite example at that point is you want a webcam in a restaurant. And if you show the real images, you'll have these oscillating effects, because if the queue is long, people won't go. And by the time people check, the queue is empty, but the restaurant is empty. And therefore, you probably should send wrong, false, fraud images of queue to control the flow of people going to the restaurant, so that the behavior suits well to the performance of the restaurant, but not the pictures of the queues. And you want to collect this data to find out how should we betray people to have an optimal flow of people going to the restaurant. But then, do you really want to know who the individual person is? Audio recordings, there might be identifiable persons as well. Computer science has come up with a concept like K-anonymity to protect privacy. And we talk a bit about that, just to give you a vague idea. And if you know all that, you say, okay, I understand that, this is easy going. Mathematics are used to actually address the problem of asserting some sort of anonymity in the data, so that we can have open data, and yet you can't derive who this person actually is from whom the data was taken. Healthcare data sets are the prime example. Genetic data sets. Well, the thing is, if your genes are known, you can't have a second set of genes. It's like fingerprint. You can't just swap that. So maybe this data needs protection. Just imagine you have your mobile phone, listens to your fingerprint. The fingerprint is in an open database, and people find out how to produce living fingerprints. So all you need is have that device with your fingerprint and open the smartphone. And you have no defense against that, because you can't have a new set of fingers. So the whole system is broken. Demographic data sets, sociology studies, Census Bureau, search logs, recommender systems, great for sensitive data. What did you buy yesterday? Oh, very interesting. you bought these 2 books on how to produce explosives. Could be of great interest, although what you really wanted in these books is find out how to build storage sites or whatever. And the mere content was of no importance, but nevertheless, the fact that you borrowed this book from the library might be a clue to someone else. Might even be a wrong clue. AOL search data, wait, we'll have that example in a moment. Social networks of blogging sites. I know that in Iran they actually monitor pictures of demos, and because you have pictures of friends from other places in Facebook, suddenly you can find out who was there. Is that a good idea to have these data available to everyone? Netflix movie ratings, Amazon is one of those who really sit on the data, and the fact that Facebook leaked its data to Cambridge Analytics was completely wrong in the public discussion. I mean, the fact that a company got this data was not a public breach, in my opinion. It was a disaster for Facebook. They can't keep their data. And at least in Germany, journalists or so didn't spot that problem. That was a Facebook problem. They could not defend their data against a nosy company. The fact that this company was finding out internal information is a secondary effect, in my view. The first one was Facebook was too stupid to protect its asset, data. Identity disclosure is probably a bad thing. It may not be essential research information, but it may be embarrassing for the person. And we see some examples in a moment, especially when it comes to health data. In case you have some health problems, do you really want everyone to know about that? Now let's anonymize data. That's the thing to do. Make it anonymous. Remove direct identifiers. Remove everything is a solution, but then you have no data. So what can we remove to keep the data valuable, but to blur or remove the traces to the individual? Aggregation is an answer. Just add it all up. Suppose we have a list of your ages here. If you have the average age, you cannot derive mine. If you have a list of the age of people, I'm sure you can find out mine immediately because I'm simply the oldest here. Restrict upper and lower ranges, replace rather than removing them, use log edits. Well, these are methods to actually formulate stuff. Oh, here comes the magic number. Okay, for this and for the previous one as well. That's the second already. Oh, both magic numbers. Okay, now we have the 2929, great for number 1, which is good. Otherwise, I would have invented the 4711, and the Germans would have started to laugh. Because the 4711 is a classic joke in Germany. It's a rather cheap perfume. And coming from Cologne, the 4711, it's the standard magic number for jokes. Okay, that was 2929, and the other one is 1914. So let's have the one first, and remind me of swapping it. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's the old one. So in case you have the old one, that's the one for the previous course on international cooperation, which was rather short. So the challenges of sensitive data are get rid of compromising data, anonymizing. It depends heavily on the file type and the content. You think that it is comparatively easy. Remove the identifiers from log files, say usernames, user IDs, and so on. But things can backfire. A famous example was from the Austrian telecommunication system. You could get the data where how mobile phones moved in their republic, which is great because you can see traffic jams. If a bunch of mobile phones suddenly don't move, there must be a traffic jam, especially if they're if they're on a motorway. Wonderful for prediction. And so this data was readily available. No phone number, no nothing. It's just how a phone, you didn't even know the email, nothing. It's just a phone. They had numbers, serial numbers. Phone number 1 moved this way. Phone number 2 moved that way. Nevertheless, after about a week, people were able to derive whose phone is which number, because you know where people were living. And because of behavior patterns, you suddenly detected, okay, number 12, totally anonymous, must be the phone of this politician, because at 8 in the morning, this person started from this area, and we know that our politician started at 8 in the morning. The next day, we know he started at 9, and then number 12. So de-anonymizing is possible even if you think that you have completely anonymized your data set, because you don't know about the smartness of the attacker. And the attacker might use all sorts of information, even information which is not in your data. And this is what we're going to see. So it is straightforward and easy to make the data anonymous, but whether it really withstands any attack is a very big question. Don't believe in being bright. We have tools, for example, to search and replace sensitive information like credit card numbers, postal routing codes, etc. But when we replace them one-to-one, if you find the way back, you suddenly have the original credit card number again. So the thing is probably to add up purchases of people with their credit card numbers so that you lose the fine granularity, but you don't lose too much of information. Blurring images is well known. As you see in newspaper reports, suddenly a suspect, the photo is blurred to protect the privacy of a suspect as long as the person is not yet committed for crime. It may be more complex in videos because there's more information than just the face. The person is moving. And if the person is limping, this is not an anonymous data set. You see, this person is limping. Strange. Must be not 1 out of 1,000,000, but 1 of 100. And then by just picking the 99 others, removing them, you find out who the person was. Let's think a bit about privacy. After all, it has to be formal, and therefore privacy protection can only be done by law. Because if we are not forced, we will not do it. If we are forced to do it, and in Germany they're quite fuzzy about privacy laws. Self-regulation can be an answer, but you have seen Facebook lost vital data and nothing happened. Their shares are still rising. They should drop, but despite losing their data to Cambridge Analytica, nothing happened. So you think self-regulation is a working answer because you lose reputation if your self-regulation doesn't work. But if you're big enough, too big to fail, these feedback mechanisms don't work. You may have privacy-enhancing technologies by individuals, like using encryption, and you might have privacy education. But even so, when you know that WhatsApp is having a complete set of your friends, your phone numbers, friends' phone numbers, and so on, well, do you always put in wrong phone numbers in WhatsApp just to confuse WhatsApp, and before calling people you swap the 2 digits? No. So although even if you know about privacy concerns to certain products, after a while you give up and say, okay, they know it anyway. But privacy education is not necessarily a solution to actually ensuring privacy, because people say, it won't hit me, hopefully. We have the general belief that privacy is a fundamental human right, and we have a Supreme Court ruling on that in Germany. Basically, the fact behind this, if you don't have privacy, democracy might be at stake, because if you feel watched, you're no longer completely free with your decision. Just imagine when you put your federal election, the voting cabin, you have a camera. Will you still vote the way you thought you wanted to vote? And there, okay, this is again an extreme example, but it shows that if you feel watched and you feel not by a camera, but also other people knowing too much about you, your behavior will change. Other examples in a totalitarian system. You don't speak openly because you don't know what's happening, and therefore your behavior changes. So our Supreme Court said this is a fundamental human right, and therefore privacy should be ensured at some stage, which on the other hand sometimes leads to funny things, like totally obvious stuff is not permitted for privacy reasons. Well, the answer could be, yeah, well, okay, we know it anyway. It depends on the state. Some states are more privacy concerned than others. And I think we in Germany are somewhat more concerned about Big Brother on the other side of the Atlantic than Big Brother being concerned about himself. If you think you can control the NSA, you're not so worried about it. We can't control them, and therefore probably we should have a bit more privacy. On the other hand, we exchanged, okay, well, this is going to a sociological problem on international relationships, and we can't really solve that. But at a minimum, we have a provision for rights of, homes are not being violated, to some at least, and the secrecy of communications in most states. Private personal communication is protected. But on the other hand, you see that they become quite upset when WhatsApp started to encrypt, so they can't monitor personal communication. Although personal communication should be private, there is some interest, and you immediately see this clash when it's about monitoring criminals. Which way are you going? Either you have complete protection, which gives complete protection to criminals, or you open it and suddenly, well, everyone is potentially open. This is so complicated that we're not really covering that. So you can relax and say, okay, you may have a different opinion as well. Let's go back. If we think about privacy and some things that shouldn't be known to the others, the first thought indeed is anonymize. Remove all personal interesting stuff. Name, social security number, phone number, email address. What else? Okay, anyway, anything that identifies the person directly. And the question always is that enough? Let's have a definition of the late 60s. Definition of privacy being the claim of individuals or groups to determine for themselves when and how and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. This is privacy. Well, you know, gossip is the answer. For how many thousands of years gossip never respected privacy? So have you known that so-and-so is in love with A and B? This is not a new problem. And the dream is that A and B can control that. You can't. Once it's out, it's out. But at least this is a try. And we have three dimensions of privacy. The personal one, it's becoming academic, yeah? Protecting a person against undue interference and information that violates the moral sense. We have territorial privacy, protecting a physical area, so that you shouldn't enter a certain property. And then we have the third dimension, informational privacy, which is relatively new. And this is a concept that only came up with digitization in the 50s, 60s, dealing with the gathering and selective dissemination of information. When you think how much money the US spent in the CIA to get important, crucial, classified information from the Soviet Empire, until they finally realized, invest the money in Facebook and you have all your friends telling you everything free. It's much cheaper. And you invest in Facebook and you even make money on the stock exchange. The best the government can come up with. But informational privacy, that's what we in the computers should be worrying about. The privacy enhancing technologies could be protecting user identities and protecting the confidentiality. One thing is, can be protected, or maybe shouldn't the state help us by giving us several identities? Shopping with Amazon, use a different name, given to you by the state. So in case of fraud, the state can find the way back. But it's who against whom? It's a rat race. When you think Amazon being a US company, maybe your state is good to issue you with several IDs so that this big company has no chance what you're doing. You change your identities. However, in the case of a fraud, you can be identified. Why should Amazon know my name and my birthday? It's pointless. I mean, I want to buy something. If I go to a corner shop here, they don't want to see my ID card. Would be nice. Interesting concept. If you go to, want to buy something for lunch, no, we need your ID card first. What's the point? Amazon has it. So why do they need it? Of course they need it because they have some interest in that data. But wouldn't a good protection be support from the local government against those nosies? Protecting user identities can be done by anonymity. No need to know who you are. As long as I pay, I mean, in shops it works nicely. I go in, I pay, I get the product, I walk out. Nobody knows who I am. In the case of Amazon, they know everything about me before they deliver certain goods. Pseudonymity is, okay, you don't need your identity, but you can still be tracked if the need arises. Unobservability is a lot more. The service is not able to find out who you are. And the unlinkability means you cannot identify sender and recipient when they communicate. Try to do that with mobile phones. Try to hide sender and recipient. When you make a phone call, you put in numbers, no way to hide. Why do we have a phone system set up that way? Why not have a service somewhere which you call the service, and the service connects you to the recipient? Only the service knows about that, and if the service is in a different country, well, suddenly, at least locally, you have this unlinkability. You're no longer locally able to find out who calls whom. It's a bit like the darknet is based on that. Trying, despite the fact that you have a connection from A to B, have so many intermediate connections that it's impossible to find out the connection from A to Z. Nice try. Pseudonyms with respect to their function. Personal ones, public, personal, non-public, okay, lots of buzzwords. Or roles for business things, the professor. Sometimes you don't need the name, it's just the function. And you know exactly what is going to happen, although even if you don't know who it will be today, at least you can address them. And this is a pseudonym. You can generate them yourselves, you can reference them, you can have cryptographic ones, and you can have one-way, one use only. This is all in the theory, how to anonymize, make things of non-trackable. And when you list all that, some of the stuff is sort of obvious. Somebody in the 60s had to write a master thesis, sat back and came up with these options. It's not rocket science. It's when you try to hide for good reason, well, those are the ways to do it. You can protect user identities by depersonalization of data subject, for example. The perfect one is data is rendered anonymous in such a way that the data subject is no longer identifiable. That's what we thought with the mobile phone data. We've removed everything. We have introduced consecutive numbers of the phones, and yet we were still able, after 2 or 3 weeks, to identify individual phones. So even if you think you have the perfect solution, it may not be the perfect solution. So let's go for the practical one, since we know perfect isn't possible. It is, well, quite hard to find out. And in the case of this mobile phone data, it required quite a bit of effort. And therefore, if we say we have a practical depersonalization, this is a more secure way of saying, well, look, we think it is pretty good. And you're never blamed for pretending it's perfect, and then it fails to be perfect. The controls can be interference controls and privacy preserving methods for data mining. Okay. You write algorithms in data mining and make sure the algorithm never finds out new information. This is quite a challenge for the programmer. Make sure no additional information is generated. This means that your database, your data safe, can only be accessed by algorithms that you have designed. Algorithms that make sure that no additional information can be derived. As soon as you open your database to other algorithms, this security is gone. Now, this is quite a challenge, making sure that you control the lot. And we have a risk to re-identification. Because somewhere else we have certain types of data in statistical records like identity data, name, address, it's listed somewhere else. Even if your database is free of such records, there might be somewhere else. Demographic data or analysis data. That's what we are after in the medical stuff. We want to analyze data, and therefore there should be diseases, habits, and so on in the database. And even if we separate them by anonymizing, how can we make sure that other databases which exist cannot be correlated? The obvious thing is that the degree of anonymity depends on the database size. Okay, the nasty example. You think you can hide in the world? You can't. There are not enough humans on Earth. I once did this calculation, how much data we can store in our Freiburg supercomputer. And if I remember it correctly, we have some more than 100, you can check that while I'm talking, 100 terabytes of data, which is more than 40 kilobytes per human online in memory. And we only have a very small supercomputer. So when you think you can hide humanity, no, There are not enough humans. We only have how many? 8 billion? It's not enough to really hide when you have the proper technological database on the other side. It was true in the 60s, 70s, when computers had 640 kilobytes of memory. But now, even for a small little Freiburg or small little supercomputer, has more than 100 terabytes of main memory, and it's only 8 billion humans. They fit in nicely. We've never done that, but just to give you an idea, when you think you can hide, always consider technology and you realize you can't. Okay. The entropy of the demographic data is supplementary knowledge, like age. If we have a list of age, okay, now Bruno is here, which rescues me. I made this joke about we have this list of how old we are, and I'm quite easy to detect. Now together we probably can hide. But we're only two. They have a closer look at us and you find who is who. Hiding is an issue. So the entropy of the demographic data is the number of attributes, number of possible values, the frequency distribution of these values. You'll see examples. So we try to protect the confidentiality and integrity via privacy-enhanced identity management. Oh, what a nice buzzword. You have a card to open the door. What's on the card? Do you want to store age, color of your eyes, and so on? Or what do we store? So by having the technologies tamed and harnessed, so they really take care about identity management, what is really needed. That way we can start to protect a bit against nosy data collection. Limiting the access control, that's the usual thing. Don't have too many administrators. Enterprise privacy policies, yes. Try not to store too much. Tell that to Amazon or Facebook. They will laugh. I mean, their business is based on knowing as much as possible. Will we ever go to other supply companies who have better privacy policies? Maybe, if they are as good. There aren't any, so we're stuck. Steganography is hiding things in other information. You hide some secret numbers. Yeah, the magic number, you hide the magic number in a big photo. Nobody will find it except if you know where it is stored. How can we determine, after all that a certain degree is actually provided? After all what I've said, probably not at all. But we can come up with some theory so that we can at least gain some confidentiality about the way we do it. After all, you need some metrics. Different privacy-preserving techniques have a different claim of data privacy. The metrics are usually ad hoc and customized, and a uniform privacy metric is needed but is disputed because it's getting complicated and maybe some things don't work at all, yet you need a solution for your business. Dynamics of legitimate users. How do they interact? Repeated patterns of accessing the same data can leak information. Yes. Now that's how actually the English broke the German code in World War II, because the code always started with a weather report. Okay, so the first thing were, and you know the temperature, and you go for the temperature, and maybe you don't have billions of cases to check, but only millions, and they did that with the first computer. So it took them 3, 4, 5 hours to actually break the daily code, so they still had some 18 hours left. So what can be derived from certain behavior patterns? How much information is per violator? by monitoring the system. Just look at the water consumption after soccer matches. This is well known. That you can, half time and at the end, suddenly, because people go to the toilet, there's this big soar in water consumption. They all flush the toilet. So by watching the water consumption, you find out whether a soccer match is going on. The behavior, okay, it's easier because you just read the newspapers, it's in the newspaper, but suppose you don't know about that, you can find out that there is a soccer match. It gets worse when we talk about these modern smart systems at home. Smart metering. You can detect the film you watch by monitoring the precise power consumption of your TV set. The color changes, the brightness, and all these changes are so obvious to smart metering when you monitor power consumption per millisecond that you know what people are watching. So the dynamics of violators, of attackers, is hard to predict because you don't know them yet. Associated costs, of course, are storage, injected traffic, consumed CPU cycles. That's how we find out all these Bitcoin minings in browser. Suddenly your machine gets warm and you wonder why. Because in that picture there was some Bitcoin mining hidden using all the CPU cycles. There are two proposed metrics, anonymity, set size, or entropy based. Well, it's like hiding in a crowd. And as I said, left-hand side, you think 1 in 4, the blue is hardly visible. In fact, you will see that this one is blue. So it's 1 in 4. And if you're more, the blue one is here, and you have 1 in n, which is not enough, as I told you, because our little supercomputer can store everyone. But we need some mathematics to finish this course, don't we? We have an anonymity set where we have the subject and the probability that it accesses private data, or that the attribute has one of X values. So for subject 1, we have 10 values, 1 over 10. For subject 2, we have 3 values, 1 a third, and so on. And then, after comes computer science lectures, it may come back. We say that the effective anonymity set size is this wonderful sum. And the maximum value of this L is exactly the size of our set if all these numbers are 1 over set size. Yes, okay. Normally, it's below average. It is below average if the distribution is no longer equally distributed, but is skewed. It's not 1 over A, but some have 1 over 2, others have 1 over 3, others have 1 over 1,000,000. And therefore, if it's not equally distributed, the anonymity gets worse. And if it gets worse, a violator may start to learn and see how it gets worse. Let's go to the other thing, the entropy-based metrics. Randomness or uncertainty. Again, the more the attacker knows, the less entropy, the less security you have. And just have to compare the current one with the maximum value to find out whether you're still safe. Unfortunately, there's no device like a Geiger counter where you walk around and say, okay, tick, 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 okay, you're still safe, okay, we have enough data about him. That's not possible. But at least afterwards, with theoretical means, we can start to prove that it was possible to attack because due to that leakage, the entropy went down. So this is more a theoretical approach. It doesn't give you an individual protection, but at least you can try to derive some knowledge about the security of the data set. How much can be leaked? Try to quantify that. The privacy loss is a function over time. And even if you don't like all these figures, I mean, lean back and try to understand privacy loss is a function over time. The longer you live, the more people will know about you. You lose privacy. And it's like going to a pub, the hours you know, told everyone your story of life, and your privacy has gone down. Over time, privacy decreases. So the maximum value minus the value over time. And what's the entropy over time? That's the typical definition, a sum of weighted parameters of minus pi and the logarithm to the base 2. Okay, yeah. Say, it looks nice, we believe it. It's a nice formula. I mean, this is the last lecture. We don't want really to write an exam on this formula, but you know, you can sum it up, and this is logarithm of the various privacy values, and you add them up. Have an example. Take a private phone number, 10-digit phone number. Store them. You have 10 digits, which you store. And each value is from 0 to 9, because we have our decimal system. And all attributes are equally important. The weight is 1. We really simplify now. And what's the maximum entropy that's possible? Well, each has a value of 1 over 10, 1/10, 0.1, because any position could be any number between 0 and 9. So we see that A1 is I with a probability of 0.1. And it breaks down to weight is 1. They're all equally important. Minus 0.1 logarithm to the base 2 of 0.1. Add it up, and you get 33.3. Wonderful. Not 42, it's 33.3. You know the standard joke, 42, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to everything. But here it's 33.3. Suppose now that after time t, whatever, the attacker finds out 3 digits, the first 3 digits. Okay, therefore, suddenly it breaks down. You add it up. The first 3 are known, and our first sum runs from 4 to 10 for the remaining 7. It's only 23.3. So we have an information loss of 10. Great. What does it tell us? Well, we have an example that proves that we can measure the entropy of privacy, but we still don't know what 10 means. But at least we've proved that the formula makes some sense. What is 10 meaning? Does it hurt? Does it make you happy if you lose 10? Do you get a beer for 10? I don't know. But at least you see as a function, it's becoming academic. The application to your personal life is still unclear, but we can see how the disclosure of information shows an indicator. So we have a privacy loss.
Can I have a small break of your time?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, now we have a little break.
Yeah, just
it's not for a commercial, it's for important information.
It's because when I arrived from my lecture, Schneider already started with his one, so I need to interrupt. Sorry for that.
No.
So eu tenho alguns avisos e pedidos. Vocês viram que eu botei uma camisa hoje. Quem me conhece sabe que isso não acontece muitas vezes. Meus crianças perguntaram o que estava acontecendo hoje. Falei, hoje é um dia importante. Eu queria pedir para vocês que daqui a pouco nós vamos, então, depois dessa aula, nós vamos fazer uma pequena cerimônia de encerramento, e ela é muito importante para a gente poder fazer as devidas fotos. Tem um fotógrafo, inclusive vocês já devem ter visto ele circulando aqui, para poder fazer o nosso relatório de final de curso. Então, quando acabar a aula, eu vou fazer um pouquinho sacanagem, vou passar a chamada só na hora que tiver na hora de cerimônia de encerramento. Eu não vou passar a chamada antes. Nosso combinado é que vocês ficariam aqui até as 19h30. Prometo que não passa disso, mas eu vou exigir que hoje aconteça, porque hoje é importante. Eu mandei um e-mail para vocês, então daqui a pouco vai chegar o pró-reitor de pesquisa, vai chegar a diretora do setor de ciências exatas, e nós vamos ter a oportunidade de pelo menos agradecer formalmente aqui as pessoas. Vai começar às 19 horas. Peço que vocês daí se sentem também mais para frente, para a gente poder fazer uma foto mais legal do auditório, beleza? Então aí eu vou passar 2 listas de chamada. Vejam só, descobrimos hoje que o DAD na Alemanha gostaria de ter o nome de vocês escrito com a letra de vocês, assinado por vocês. Então eu vou passar uma lista de chamada normal, que funciona como as outras, vocês assinam nas aulas de hoje, e a outra lista de chamada vai ser só para a gente mandar o original para o DAD com os presentes que estão aqui. Paciência, os que não vieram, a gente vai precisar fazer isso desta forma. Então, esses são os 2 avisos curtos para essa aula. O pessoal que está em casa assistindo a gente remotamente, nós vamos transmitir o encerramento e o Magic Number da segunda aula vai ser mostrado a partir... The second Magic Number will be shown after 18:30. So, só vai abrir às 6:30 o segundo Magic Number. Aí a gente mostra ele para a aula de hoje também, tranquilo, como foi nas outras, certo? Combinado? Obrigado, gente. Valeu. Thank you very much.
Okay. No, it's good to have a break like that. And I think the photo stuff that fits in nicely with the privacy issues. How much privacy do we lose if we have a photo taken? 11. Don't ask me how I found out about 11. And don't ask me what it means. But at least we saw that we can have a theoretical model telling us something. How to apply the theoretical model is also a bit unclear to me, but at least it gives an indication. But identifiers, which are there, this is back to the harder part, key attributes, what's the name, address, phone number, it's uniquely defining a person when it adds up. Therefore, these should always be removed because that's the obvious stuff. But there are other identifiers like postal code. And this is stolen from an American book. As you see, it's a 5-digit zip code. That's the classical American zip code. Birth, gender. When you combine these through, birth date, gender, and zip code, you can uniquely identify 87% of the US population, only by these 3 values. Pretty unique. Now you suddenly understand why they ask for your zip code and your birth date. It helps to identify fraud and other things, but it also helps to identify an individual. Would you have guessed that? That these 3 things, which are totally nonsense, you might say, really identify 87% of the US population uniquely. And I'm sure the same applies here. Well, this is not specific about the US, but they actually did the computation. On the other hand, birth date is pretty fine over 100 years time period. Birth date and zip code, and okay, gender, and suddenly you're down to a small number. It's not to be expected at first, but the birth date is 365 per year, and the whole population is spread out evenly, and so per day it's becoming quite thin. It can be used for linking anonymized data sets with other data sets, and it has been used for great examples in the US where they proved that some claims by politicians and others were simply wrong, because with that information you can really attack that. And therefore we are probably coming into some interesting stuff, the classification of attributes. Let's have a look, and this is probably more interesting than formula, because the proper examples give you some feeling of what can be wrong, what will go wrong if you're not careful. You have key attributes in medical records, the names. Okay. You have quasi-identifiers, date of birth, gender, and zip code. And you have the sensitive attributes like disease, heart disease, hepatitis, bronchitis, broken arm, okay, that's easy, flu, yeah, whatever this example setter came up with. I'm not a doctor, I can't tell you anything about that, but for me it's just data. But you see the key attributes, that's the name, the quasi-identifiers, and what we're after. And by looking at these, maybe we can screw it up to the point where people become safe. The data is hidden. And this is the K anonymity, which means there are at least K minus one other individuals in that data set. What do we have to remove to make sure that K anonymity is guaranteed? In the sense, you're not alone. There are K minus one other people sharing the same data, which at least is better than being unique. If K is 2, that's a stupid concept. Assume K equals 10, then there are another 9 with the same properties. Go back to that table. Birth date and gender is known, but there are K people in the table with the same birth date and same gender. Okay, in that case, you're 1 in K. If K equals 10, you decide whether you feel safe or not. If K is 1,000,000, you might say, yep, oh, now I'm happy. That means, if we go with this K anonymity concept, that one of these quasi-identifiers must appear in at least K records. How can we generalize that? Replace these identifiers with less specific values until we get K identical values. What's an easy way? Well, an easy way is suppression. Check your credit card printout. You see stars rather than your credit card number. Zip code. Remove the last 2 digits, replace them by stars. Suddenly, more people share the same zip code. Maybe that makes it harder for the attacker to find out who is who. There are lots of algorithms in the literature, and they always have the same aim: produce useful anonymization, so that people are really becoming anonymous. At least what the writer of the algorithm thinks, because it's not under control what you have as side channel attacks using other databases. The goal is to have a record made indistinguishable from at least K-1 other records. So there are always another K-1 bodies in that list. Replace with less specific but semantically consistent values. Here is the example zip code. 3 zip codes merge to 476. Ages move to 2 in the range 20 to 30. No longer precise. Sex is a bit more difficult. You only have 2. But well, no, we have 3 in Germany now, by law. Okay, that makes 3, but that is not much help, having 3. Okay, forget about sex, that's the answer. Don't distinguish anymore. In that case, if you remove this criterion, that's fine. Here is an example of a K-anonymous table. Birth 1965, okay, there are quite a few born in 65, so that no longer distinguishes. We've sorted gender-wise, the top 2 are male, and the zip code now is shortened to 4 digits. Suddenly, we can no longer distinguish the 2, and therefore we do no longer know who has short breath of the 2 and who is the guy with the chest pain. So we have 2 candidates, but we don't know which is which. Whether you feel safe with 2, okay, I wouldn't. But at least for the case of this example here, going down to 2 is helpful. The next 2, okay, okay, they can't be distinguished at all, isn't it? The 2 ladies, great, both have hypertension. So this is really secure now. The third one, obesity. It's overweight. Is that still a protection? The chest pain and the other overweight. Okay, maybe just by looking you can find out. And separate again if you have an access to photos somewhere else. Okay, there are actually 3. The yellow stuff, well, it's hardly visible. Zip code is merged. And we have 2 again, 67, 67, both with chest pain and the same zip code. Great. Aren't we lucky in the last case that both guys with chest pain have a zip code 0213? So we can shorten to by 1 digit. Suppose there were, one is 02, the other is 03. We can separate the 2 again. Really, you have to make sure and check your data whether you can guarantee this K being K anonymous. K equals 2, and the quasi-identifiers are race, birth, gender, and zip. This is copied from American literature. We didn't invent that, it's just taken that. That's what seems to worry them specifically. So, example of a generalization. Look at this table again. Okay, resolution. Those were 3 white, born in 64, male, with chest pain, short breath, and so on. And you have the external data source. Great. You think you're safe. You can't really find out whether Andre is one of them, although everything's correct. 64, male, zip code. Andre here has the 02135. Okay, take the 5 away. It could be, Andre could be any of the 3. So linking is no help. Protection, super. Let's go to some microdata somewhere else. This release table here with these quasi-identifiers is 3 anonymous. However, if the opponent, the attacker, knows Alice's identifier being zip code 47677, age 29 and female, it's still not clear about the first 3. Yet, okay, just wait. Not yet quite clear. But some of you sort of, hang on. Alice is female. There are some things females never get. Prostate cancer. So the data contains information which leads to leakages. Because even if you remove the sex from the characteristic of the data, the disease, sex is being reintroduced. So we think, okay, here, that's fine, fits anywhere in here. But this tells us number 3 is out. Alice is either 1 or 2. That tells us the disease of Alice, because the others are sort of falling out, and we don't have enough choices here. I mean, all these things are just trying to show you have to be damn careful when you talk about anonymity. You believe that you do something. Things do go wrong at a corner which you don't expect. Because data is sort of close together and not widely spread. Each record in that thing must have k close neighbors. But in real world, the data sets can be quite sparse. The Netflix price data model, 17,000 dimensions. The Amazon customer record has several million dimensions. Great matrices. You need storage to multiply these matrices. So the nearest neighbor can be very far. And when you project that to low dimensions, you lose everything. So the K anonymity is useless. It all goes down to 1. Because it's sparse and wide, and these examples which we just discussed, it's close together. Therefore, we think with these methods we can do something. But when it goes to a Netflix data or so, basically the matrices are full of zeros and a few entries. And when you project that down, You lose everything. So this concept fails. In addition to that, the k-anonymity does not provide privacy if the various values lack diversity. Just look at the various cancer examples. If you have 17 types of cancer, that's still fine in the previous example. But with Alice just being one case left, even if it appears twice. Here, let's have a look at a 3 anonymous patient table. Age is cleared out. A person is in the 20s with a heart disease. Interesting. So this is probably made up. This would be more in the 50s and 60s, but okay, why not 20s? The other, above 40, has a flu. Okay, and so on. So that looks at if we are 3 anonymous. Let's look at Bob, who happens to have zip code 47678 and being age 27. Where would we locate Bob? Apparently in the above 3. Yeah. So Bob has a heart disease at the age of 27. Let's look at Carl, who is 36. Well, with that background knowledge, we suddenly see that we have 2 choices left. Or one diversity, if there's not too much choice, we see that Caucasian with these zip numbers have a flu, another flu, acne, shingle, okay, whatever they have. Sensitive attributes must be diverse. You see that it's distributed over the groups, you see, Caucasian and Asian, same stuff. You can't distinguish the look from the disease. That's pretty good, although you sometimes wonder whether medical studies really want that. After all, you want to find out specific diseases of certain branches of the population. Let's take this apart. The original data set, like that. Most of them seem to have cancer. Go for A, Caucasian. Only 50%, the others have flu. So the quasi-identifier is diverse. It yields information which it shouldn't yield. Let's go for the other anonymization. In that case, from that group, you have 99%. Everyone in there can be immediately being diagnosed without the knowledge on the information what they have. So this limitation of this one diversity is, suppose HIV positive is 1% and negative is 99. That's far apart. And this one diversity, being 99 to 1, get an equal distribution on the other side, so you cannot distinguish between the two, is almost impossible because the data sets are so different. You don't have enough people who are ill with that disease. And when you have 2 diversity, with a 1%, you need 100 equivalence classes. Okay, you only have 2. It's always, if you split it in 2, it's 49 and 1. It doesn't help, but having this non-equal distribution means you lose it. You can't guarantee privacy. Don't even try it. Therefore, the only way out is, if you have a register of our HIV patients, keep it away from everyone, because you cannot guarantee anonymity. Let's go for some attribute disclosures. Let's have a look at Bob again. You find it here. The more interesting fact is we can't quite tell what Bob has, but he has some problems with the stomach, whatever. More interesting, we know that his salary is between 20 and 40,000. So Bob isn't a very rich person. Was this intended when the first setup was made? Probably not. And now suddenly we can find out about the salary. Simply because these diversity concepts do not consider the semantics of sensitive values. It's bits and bytes without meaning, and it's the human brain which becomes the dangerous attacker. When things are quite close, back to that Caucasian examples again, we think that they're quite equally distributed between Asian and Caucasian. But when it comes to these things, we think that we are probably safe, aren't we? Let's suppose that we heard something. Bob is in hospital here, okay, but he has a flu. Suddenly this table is ready to attack. Flu, Caucasian, and we find out things we shouldn't know. Bob has other problems as well, which can be a problem for the employer. Flu is not a quasi-identifier. Flu is a real identifier. So, wrong setup. Okay. Aren't we frustrated? No, we shouldn't. All I wanted to tell you is, watch out. It's not easy. It's error-prone. And look for the promises. If the data sets aren't big enough, if they're not separated well enough, then you have the individual attack. On the other hand, just putting everything together is of no value, because in medical data, you want to find out certain things. And if you put it all together and say, we know nothing, what's the point? I mean, you're always in between how much do we want to open and how much do we disclose accidentally. Here's a sort of less medical, but just as interesting example from AOL in 2006. The search query logs from 650,000 users. They had 20 million queries over 3 months. Okay. So what's the goal? Analyze data for research purposes to better service users and advertisers. What are people interested in? That's the question. What were their searches? And, you know, sometimes we get statistics from Google about the most favorite search pattern, which is in right now. If there's a Netflix series and somebody gets murdered, you want to find out, and you get these buzzwords. But in that case, it was a more general thing. They wanted to find out, what are people looking for? Protect privacy? Yes, we do, because there are government laws and regulations. And the search queries might reveal income, evaluation, intentions, what people really want, etc. So protect privacy. The query logs had therefore the following form: this ID, query time. So user 44-17749 had some queries, query time at 6 in the morning. Item rank click. What was the URL? Shortened. They really thought hard and thought this is okay. And the New York Times then found this anonymous ID, because the sample queries by this ID was numfingers, 60 single men, about dogs, landscapers in Lilburn, Georgia. Ah, interesting. About Arnold. You look at the Lilburn register and you find there are 14 citizens named Arnold. You contact them all, and you find out this was a 60-year-old Thelma Arnold. You identify precisely by looking for additional information. Interesting information. Now you've got user number 1. User number 1 is now no challenge. Go for user number 2. 1 has already been removed. So in theory, chasing user number 2 should be slightly easier than chasing number 1, and so on. You can do that iteratively. And once the data set is becoming smaller, there's no protection anymore. They thought they had solved it. They didn't. So k-anonymity can be quite harmful. The data set can leak sensitive information, and we believe that the attacker is nice, not using additional information, which is a fault. It relies on locality, and therefore it destroys real-world data sets like Amazon. So this k-anonymity concept, which was around in computer science for a long time and still is in class, it fails miserably. Frustrating, isn't it? So we are left with no concept. Brings us back to the original stuff. Research data management. Research data may be personal, may have quasi-identifiers, may have trade secrets, intellectual property. And when we require an authentic replication of scientific computing, we must keep the digital artifacts, and we must avoid domain-specific solutions. So science actually wants the data in a pure form, otherwise you cannot derive information. Unfortunately, research data management makes things worse. When we want to reuse data, we have complex tool chains. Even the simple examples were open to immediate disclosure. Now we have tool chain and we don't know what our adversary, our attacker, will make use of. We have distributed setups and we have proprietary data formats. We use, as we learned, emulation and virtualization to react the environment. So the data is open to us. Maybe we can sort of fully encapsulate the complete process and have an interactive workflow description so that we seal everything from our nosy attacker. And that's what I said earlier in this course, that the algorithms are trained in a way, are made in a way that you cannot derive extra information. And if we seal the whole process, we should think about how to make sure that other things cannot be derived, that only the stuff that was once done can be done over and over again, and not additional tricks to derive additional information. The good thing about this sealed environment is you can't inject data. It's sealed, but it's no guarantee. But at least it's an attempt to actually make the algorithms unmodifiable environment, and nothing else can be done with them. We can try to control the interaction between the user and the environment. So the implications for research data management is that you think first, and this is what we talked about. We have our data protection officer, hoping that this person understands everything. And we have our ethics committee, hoping that this ethics committee has learned a lot about things that went wrong and tell you, okay, you can't do it this way with the data. That brings me back to this possible job profile of being a data manager. And the IT services, they're sort of in the middle. They're always the culprit. We provide the data, we have the data, and unfortunately, the data can be used. Now, why could this happen? We on the IT side don't have a clue. Used already mentioned earlier, yesterday by Dirk, we have online courses in the UK where they thought about data protection, rights and access, more examples, more attempts, more warnings, that if you really want to be scared because you have a nice weekend and there's nothing else to do, you can go through and say, okay, I thought this was safe. It is not when the attacker has proper equipment. We know that, and therefore we should be more careful, or at least less reckless when we handle data. After all, it's about people's secrets. The other alternative, have everything openly online, I think is a bad one. Okay, this is more or less what we have, and therefore we can go for the evaluation. Yep. There is an evaluation, and this will not be done here on paper because people work online as well. But what I meant to say is do it. After all, we want to find out how we performed.
On Monday, you'll have an evaluation on Moodle. I will ask everyone that is registered in the course to fill it as a feedback for us, okay? Monday or Tuesday, but you will get a warning on Moodle telling you when it's ready, and then you please, it's easier for us to evaluate the result as well.
This is just sort of the attempt, do it, because we want to find out how we did. This is our interest. I mean, we came here preaching day after day. Was it worth it? Did you learn something? Say, this course was okay, this could be better, we missed this. Or do you say, this was so wonderful, I want to do it again? You can do because it's online. The outlook is that everything is online, will be online, and you can sort of have a look again if you want to cover certain topics. So all that remains is, in the name of all our speakers, to thank you for your continuous attention, for staying with us. And from our side, I could say we enjoyed it too. It was quite rewarding because you followed the courses and sort of watching seeing interested faces. Sometimes at home, people sort of digging behind their computers doing other things during lectures. This was not the case here. So we also enjoyed it quite well. So thanks again for your attention. And I think this is more or less the last one. Yes, we're through. And that's it.
So we would have some time for questions if you want. Do you have any questions? I even have a microphone. If there are no questions, so I would suggest we use this. We are waiting now for the Pro-Rector of Research and the Decan of our faculty to arrive so that we can make the proper closure of the summer school. Okay, so we will wait until they arrive. I don't know, it should be half an hour or something. We will have a break. I should suggest you should also use this break. We have almost the whole Freiburger team here available. So Dirk is here, Bernd, Jonathan, and Professor Schneider. So you should use this opportunity, if you haven't, to talk to them, ask how it works, how can I get there, how can I do this, how should I do that. That's the opportunity, last opportunity you have to get some personal contact. Don't feel afraid of not speaking well English, that's not a problem. So you should push yourself a little bit. So you should use this last opportunity, we can change some ideas. And as soon as everyone is there, we should make a small closure so that we can appropriately thank everyone for that. Okay?
Eu vou chamar você, pode ser, eu chamo por mim, para fazer certinho como manda o figurino. Ok?
Boa noite a todos. Então, agora eu gostaria de chamar para compor a mesa diretiva, que é o encerramento aqui, o professor Francisco Assis Mendonça, que é o pró-reitor de pesquisa e pós-graduação, o professor Dr. Gerhard Schneider, que é pró-reitor para a transformação digital, a professora Ana Luísa Lordello, que é diretora do setor de ciências exatas. Bom, eu já estou aqui e convidar o Dr. Dirk von Zuhodolets, que é o organizador desse evento. Please take seats. The idea is that we... Eu vou fazer uma parte em português e vou fazer uma parte em inglês. So I will mix languages, ok? Eu queria agradecer muito, em primeiro lugar, ao Apolinário. O Apolinário está aqui todos os dias gravando, transmitindo, e devo dizer que com um empenho que não é óbvio para quem conhece o funcionamento das universidades aqui. Então, Apolinário, muito obrigado também para a sua equipe. Foi um prazer conhecê-lo e foi um prazer trabalhar com você. Se todo mundo trabalhasse assim, dava muito mais certo. Verdade, muito obrigado. Estenda meus agradecimentos à equipe de suporte das filmagens. And let's hope people at home, and if you get YouTube stars, that's because of him. Yeah, so let's hope. I would like to thank to the forestry department that lent us this auditorium. So we have been monopolizing it for the last 3 weeks, using it almost every afternoon. And so thank you very much for letting us use it. I would like to thank very much to our lecturers. So I will not nominate them all here, but we had 7 lecturers from Germany, Freiburg and Ulm. We had 4 lecturers, 5, 6 from Brazil for our university. It was a kind of a mix. It's not always everything fits plainly together, but on the other side, I think it's very important to have different people talking about a subject, and it makes you think about it a little bit harder. If you get used to one way of teaching the same thing, suddenly someone else comes and tells you something a little bit different. So that was a little bit the idea, and that's also the idea of the summer school, that you can have the time to know different people from different locations. Of course, they're all from Germany. That's part of the deal. Yeah? I'll thank you very much for that. I'll thank especially for Dirk, because Dirk is the one that made the heavy lifting of the organization back there in Germany, and we have done it for the 3rd time, so Dirk, very much thank you. And to Professor Schneider, of course, because he is giving all the support. So summer school always works nice if the DAAD pays, which he did and does, and if you have 2 partners that can do the work together. And this has, I think, been working very nicely those last 10 years. I really appreciate that. I thank you all for being here all those days. Hope you make a nice evaluation. No, kidding, at the end. But that's from my part. I just really wanted to use this opportunity to publicly thank you for all that was possible to do, and apologize for things that didn't work as it should. Perhaps next time we'll get it better. I must tell you, we are getting better. If you had been to the other summer schools, you would see this one is much better than the other ones were. So I think we are going somewhere, okay? Thank you very much. So now, eu vou convidar a professora Ana Luísa Lordello, é vice-diretora do setor de Ciências Exatas, e convidar ela, então, para nos dirigir a palavra.
Boa noite a todos e a todas. Eu vou falar em português, because my English is not so good as Daniel. Aproveito a oportunidade para agradecer a presença de todos, em especial ao pró-reitor de pesquisa e pós-graduação, professor Francisco de Assis Mendonça, ao professor Schneider, da Universidade de Freiburg, e ao professor Daniel Weingartner, do Departamento de Informática. Eu não sabia do outro professor, não sei o nome, sorry. Bom, primeiro eu gostaria muito de parabenizar o professor Daniel pela organização de mais uma edição, 3ª, se eu não me engano, né, da DAD Summer School. O setor de ciências exatas entende que, para atingir excelência, os programas de graduação e pós-graduação devem contar com ações de internacionalização, e que vão desde mobilidade acadêmica discente e docente até a cooperação internacional. E essa iniciativa é um excelente exemplo de uma ação concreta de internacionalização de todo um coletivo, pois aqui nós temos reunidos alunos de graduação, pós-graduação e docentes da comunidade UFPR, talvez até alguns externos da UFPR. Então eu fico imensamente contente com o sucesso dessa edição e acredito, né, espero que muitas outras edições aconteçam, tá bom? Meus parabéns ao professor Daniel e a todos que participaram dessa 3ª edição. Obrigado.
Eu vou fazer as vezes de cerimônia. Professor Schneider, please, if you want to say some words.
Yes, and I'm glad I can take this opportunity to thank you once again and to thank Daniel and the support group for this wonderful support we got. We really felt at home staying with friends. We had a wonderful evening program. We had people listening to us. And I think the best thing is that we could talk about modern developments which have just only started. So the exchange of ideas, the talking to each other, was at a very high level. It was not just one side explaining the other, as we typically have in summer schools. You know, the specialists from somewhere explaining about physical experiments or so. But this was more of, rather than teaching, of talking and exchanging ideas. And I must say, I really enjoyed looking in the faces, getting the feedback of people either accepting what we said or having other ideas to that, which is part of a scientific discussion. And if we can move on in the future to get the ideas, the wonderful ideas of open access, open data across continents, the exchange of ideas, then I think we have achieved something in this conference. I would like to thank you for your attention all the time. We, as I said, enjoyed the summer school very much so. And since it was the third, you know how we like to come here. Two things, perhaps, sort of jokes are probably quite good at the end when it comes to relaxing. Two things about Freiburg University. One is our history. The university was founded in 1457, before this continent was discovered by the Europeans, when it was still peace and happiness on this side, probably. But the fun part is that one of our alumni in 1502 drew the first map of the New World, and because of bad research called it America, after America Vespucci, rather than Columbus. He confused everything. And this map was so fascinating that people copied it rapidly. No copyright issues. Open data, the map spread, and therefore the name still stuck. So that's why it's called American. Ever since we try to have better research. This shouldn't happen a second time. The second thing is our university still has a few old vineyards, because in the 300-400 years ago, the quality of the water was so poor that people drank wine instead, and professors were paid in wine. We still have this tradition, and the quality has improved ever since we called some professionals in. And I would like to hand it over as a thank you to the two officials, not to Daniel, so don't get upset, he already has his bottle. And there are two things in there. Not only a bottle of wine, but also, important thing, you know that our supercomputer is called Nemo. This is also the fish. And that's why we have a little reminder of our supercomputer in there and this product of our region. Thank you very much. Thank you for your hospitality here. We really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Boa noite a todas e boa noite a todos. Eu quero inicialmente saudar a professora Ana Luísa, que é a vice-diretora do setor de Ciências Exatas. E muito especialmente saudar e parabenizar o professor Daniel Weingarten por ter organizado essa escola de verão. Estavam relatando aqui agora há pouco o sucesso. And say thank you very, very much to the two colleagues from Germany to come here to help us and to bring us many aspects in sciences. And thank you very much to come and to be with us in this project. Então, nós que estamos na gestão da universidade, falo como pró-reitor de pesquisa e pós-graduação e trago a vocês as saudações do professor Ricardo Marcelo. Nós que estamos na gestão temos um pouco o papel do maestro de ter um bastão na mão e tentar animar os colegas, promover da melhor maneira possível e ajudar da melhor maneira possível a realização de eventos como esse. Eu comentava com o professor Daniel, recentemente nós fizemos o encerramento de uma escola de verão no campo da física, e foi uma escola lindíssima também, organizada dentro do CCE, do setor de Ciências Exatas, e foi uma escola de verão também lindíssima, com sucesso maravilhoso, como essa que o próprio professor Daniel me colocava aqui, os belos resultados. Para a gente que está com essa batuta na mão, ou seja, que tem o papel, né, professora Ana Luísa, de, uma vez a administração tentar oportunizar que essas atividades aconteçam, é de muita satisfação, né? Nós estamos como pró-reitor por 4 anos e vemos os colegas se empenharem, trazerem outros colegas em colaboração, como é o caso dessa escola de verão, nesse momento sendo encerrada, e no momento de tamanhas dificuldades que a gente passa no Brasil, acerca especialmente da educação, eu não preciso entrar em nenhum detalhe com vocês para falar dos desastres do Ministério da Educação nesse momento, ver um evento como esse, com tamanha participação aqui à distância, de forma eletrônica e diretamente aqui, e num cenário de tamanha dificuldade, vê-los tão empenhados, vê-los produzindo conhecimento em parceria, crescendo e legando certamente às gerações que virão para essa universidade um conhecimento que se constrói. Então eu só tenho que parabenizá-los, né? Sonhar que a gente possa ter na nossa universidade cada vez mais atividades como essas, fazer o nosso possível como gestão, como pró-reitor, para que esse tipo de atividade aconteça sempre. Nós todos sempre temos a ganhar. E agradecer essas parcerias dos colegas alemães, como eu fiz, né, que elas se repitam outras vezes, professor Daniel, parabenizá-lo mais uma vez por ter empunhado essa tarefa e tê-la feito com tamanho êxito. Então é só realmente um momento de agradecimentos a todos e parabenizar por esse êxito que aqui realmente a gente vê nesse momento. É isso. Boa noite a todos. Muito obrigado.
Pessoal, a todos, obrigado, uma boa noite. Tanto quanto as informações dos colegas estão no Google, no e-mail. Então, tá.